Brought to you by DiceyGoblin.com, online board game retailer, where every board game is an award-winning board game. Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today I'm bringing you a prototype preview of a game called Legends of the Colosseum. This is from Safe Haven Games, designed by Brian Mosley and Christian Batch. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I apologize if I'm not. But Christian Batch. This game is, well, you know what? I'm not going to talk about too much because I'm going to show you, but it is a game that I'm pretty excited about just from what I've seen of the prototype preview so far. Keep in mind, this is a prototype. Everything that you are about to see is subject to change in terms of, especially in terms of quality, but also some of the rules are still going to be tweaked and that sort of thing. You can expect to see this probably in about 2 months from now, maybe a little bit less on Kickstarter. Once I have the exact date and link, I'll put that in the description below. But just be mindful of that and keep an eye out for it. So let's get into it. All right, so Legends of the Colosseum. This is going to be a game of gladiatorial warfare where players can choose to fight in a one-time skirmish or embark on an epic campaign spanning multiple fights with multiple gladiators. And in that situation, you're going to have gladiators that get executed. You're going to hire new ones. You're going to be training them up. They're going to be leveling up, that sort of thing. Now, a couple notes on the components. This right now is a board that you piece together every time you play. That is part of the prototype. That will be a solid board when the Kickstarter is completed. The standees, if they remain standees, are supposed to be larger than they currently are in the finalized version. I do want to show some of the artwork on these guys because this is some of the final artwork for the game, which you can see there's some cool artwork on here. See that guy right there kicking somebody in the face. Let's see, here's this guy. What else we have here? All right. I think, yeah, here we go. So that artwork will be used in the final game, and obviously there may be more, but that is the feel. And I can show you the prototype box cover as well, which may give you an idea of kind of the feel we're going for here. But like I said, if they are still standees at the end of the Kickstarter, then the standees will be a little bit bigger. However, some of the stretch goals in the Kickstarter that they're planning for anyway will be to turn the standees into minis, and they either will be plastic or pewter minis. And if that's the way it goes, then they'll be based off the artwork that's already on these standees. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The box is not going to need to be this large. They're planning on shrinking that down to fit the components better. Yeah, there'll be some terrain that's involved as well, and some custom dice that will be involved with the game as well. So that's some components that will be added or changed for the final game. And of course, now when you start the game, whether you're doing a skirmish or the very beginning of a campaign, you're going to have to hire your gladiators. You might want to start with, say, 500 gold coins. Everybody would start with the same amount as they're hiring their team. And you'll note in the back of the rule book as it currently stands, there's a few of these spots where you're going to keep track of your gladiator. Their, you can name them, their level, experience points as they go, their class, this sort of thing. There's 4 in the back of this prototype rule book. However, obviously there'll be some of those included with the finalized game, and I'm sure you'll be able to print them out from the website and that sort of thing as well. So as you hire them, the gladiators themselves will cost 90 gold coins, and that'll get you a level 1 0 experience gladiator. Now, if you're just doing a one-time skirmish game, you'll be able to purchase more levels for 50 gold coins. On the other hand, if you're doing a campaign, you're going to purchase these gladiators at level 1 0 experience. You cannot purchase more levels on top of that. All right, so let's say I'm the white player over here and I'm going to purchase the gladiator. Now the Artwork really doesn't matter as far as gladiator's abilities. That's just to help you keep track of each individual gladiator on the board. But let's say I purchase this guy and I've spent 90 gold coins, right? So then the next thing I have to do while I'm setting this guy up, and you know what, let's go on in and give him a name too. We'll say that guy's name is Norbert because I think that's a great gladiator name. Then you're going to take a die, and these die are not the ones that come with the game. The prototype didn't have any in there. There will be dice, obviously, that come with the game. And so you roll it, and I got a 1, which is terrible. That means Norbert is just a peasant, and that's his class, peasant. Now, all the classes that they could have, obviously the 1 is peasant. Then a 2 is going to get you a runner, is what they're called. A 3 is an athlete. A 4 is a fighter. A 5 is a hypocrite. And a 6 is a veteran. Now, with these classes, included with the game will be a chart that shows you all the stats for the individual classes, and you can see that as you go down that some of these stats are going to improve and vary between the different classes, but generally speaking, the higher the class, the better the individual. Now, for instance, charisma is going to be an important skill to develop as you go along, though. That's going to help you convince the crowd when you're seriously wounded to stay alive, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So anyway, you can see my peasant has a movement of 3, power of 1, resilience of 1, and charisma of 1. So let's go back to Norbert's stat sheet here. And you would write that in to these 3 sections here. And the fact that I'm using a pen is not a good idea, but that's what I've got with me right now. Because you're going to want to be able to change these, because as you level up, these are going to possibly improve depending on your armor and weapons and that sort of thing. But I suppose you could just notate that over here. Regardless, it's probably going to be a good idea to have something you can erase. So I've already briefly mentioned what charisma is. Let's go over these others. Movement is, as you might expect, the number of spaces a gladiator can move on their turn. So 3 for everybody to start off with, except the runner gets 4. Makes sense. Power is the amount of damage a gladiator can deal on their turn. This will be augmented by things like their weaponry and stuff like that. But obviously the athlete and the veteran are going to be the most powerful in that situation. Resilience is how easy it is for them to absorb damage, how much damage they can take, which is going to be the best for the fighter and the veteran. And then in charisma, the hypocrite is the one that has the advantage there, where everybody else starts with a 1. Now, if you're playing a skirmish battle, you're going to have to agree ahead of time how much gold you're going to use to start the game. And this is the same as, say, in if you're playing a game like Star Wars X-Wing, you're going to decide how many points the battle you're going to bring into the battle. But with this, it's gold coins, and that's going to let you determine how many gladiators you're going to hire, and then how you're going to outfit them, and that sort of thing. So let's say in this one, we just have 2 gladiator match that they've been outfitted with various weaponry and stuff, and that's what we're going to do. Now, once your gladiators are once you've purchased your gladiators, I don't think they really were given a choice. So once you've purchased your gladiators and then you've equipped them with their armor and weaponry, then you're going to set your team closest to whichever door you have. So this you can see as a standard skirmish game. But then also in here you have things like the Barbarian Assault, where Team A will start on either side and Team B starts all together in the middle. You've got things like the Great Crossing, where you actually have a kind of a bottleneck here, and this will be impassable terrain. And this one right here looks particularly cool, the Labyrinth. This is for a 3-team battle, and you can see there's all kinds of impassable terrain here, so you're really going to be finding tons of bottlenecks and ways to get to each team and that sort of thing. So a lot of cool options in here. Oh, actually, let me point this one out as well. Wait, where was it? Hold on. All right, yeah, right here. The Pit of Fire, if you have, because there's certain moves and weapons and stuff, skills that let you throw other opposing gladiators, and this is supposed to be a fire pit here. If you throw them in there, they're immediately seriously wounded and taken out of the match. So some cool ideas here as far as different scenarios, and the base or right now included, I believe there are 12 total scenarios in here, I believe. And yeah, 12. And, you know, obviously that is something else that may continue to develop with the Kickstarter. Now, at the beginning of the first game, you'll use a die to determine the first player. And once that is determined, then the first player will move all of his gladiators one at a time, completing a full activation for each gladiator. You're not able to partially activate one and then go back to the other. So, you know, maybe this guy is, you know, an athlete, so he can, a runner, so he can run 4 spaces. And I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, you know, my peasant over here, 1, 2, 3. And then it would be the other player's turn to activate theirs, and they would do something similar. Now, when activated, a gladiator actually is able to make 2 total actions. Now, you saw me move those guys, so that was a little, it's not exactly how it worked, because actually you get 2 actions, and movement is just 1 action. Now, you could use your second action to move 1 additional space. So if this guy moved 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is his total movement for the runner, and then he chose to move 1 additional space, that would be a full activation. Otherwise, say if he was up here, or, you know, let's say these guys are out here somewhere, and he moves next to this guy to get within range of his melee weapon that only, you know, can attack 1 space. So he moved to get there, and then he could attack, and that would be his full activation. And of course, if he has a weapon that has a range of something greater than just 1, then he would be able to use that as well if he was within range. But remember, an activation uses 2 actions. Now, with the movement action, let's say that a gladiator was here. He could move up 1, attack this other gladiator, and now he's only used 1 movement point so far. He could spend the rest of his movement to move away. So he's moved 1, and then 1, 2, or 3 if he's the runner, to do a total of 4 movement points. All right, and let's talk about how combat works, which this is really the cool part of the game here. Now, if this gladiator is, obviously in this case, is within range of at least one of his weapons because he's adjacent to the other gladiator. So let's say the white gladiator is going to attack the green gladiator. First thing we need to check is how many attacks the weapon that gladiator is using allows him to make. Let's say that it's a standard weapon that only lets him make 1 attack. Well, the first thing that the attacker is going to need to do is select which part of the defender's body he's going to target with that attack. And there are 6 different parts of his body that you could attack: the head, chest, right arm, right leg, and left leg. And the way you will choose that, and there's a chart in the book that shows you what each one is numbered, but let's say we're going to attack the right arm, so we would choose secretly the number 3 on our target selection die and keep that secret until the attack actually occurs. Meanwhile, the defender is going to choose a part of his body he's going to defend, and let's say he's going to defend his head, so he would choose a 1 on his defense die and keep that secret, and then we would reveal those at the same time. Now, if a gladiator was dual wielding weapons, he would add up the total attacks of the 2 weapons in order to attack his target, but each weapon would still use their own range and special abilities and all of their own stats. But the attacks do get added up to, you know, say a total of 3 attacks or whatever it happens to be. And remember, your total number of attacks is going to be the total number of selections you make in terms of what part of this gladiator you're going to attack. So if you did have 3 attacks, you would make 3 different selections, maybe head, right arm, left leg, or however you wanted to mix that up. And now back to the defender real quick. The defender will always be allowed to make at least 1 selection in terms of what section of his body he's going to defend. However, there are certain weapons and certain armor, and if he has that on his body, it may give him additional defensive capabilities, which would be additional selections to defend his body. However, he's never allowed to make more than 3 selections for defense under any circumstances, even if he has more than that technically stackable with his armor and weaponry. So then both players will reveal their selections simultaneously, and let's say, like I said, he's attacking right arm, and he defends his head. But you know what, real quick, let's say that he did defend his right arm. If that was the case, well then the attack is blocked. That's it. Combat over. As far as that particular attack goes, you're done. But instead he didn't. He blocked his head. That's where he thought the attack was coming in. And so now you're going to have to resolve the damage that occurs. So how do we resolve the damage? Well, what you're going to do is first you're going to, as the attacker, roll a die. Oh, and you rolled a 6. All right, so that's really going to help you out. Now, what you do is you take the attacker's power, which in this case is 1 for this guy, and then you add the weapon's damage, which the damage of this weapon is he's using a heavy club, let's say, which is a 2. So you add that to it, and then you add this 6. So now we've got 1 plus 2 plus the 6, which is going to give us 9. And then you subtract away the defender's resilience, which the defender's base resilience is going to be 2 in this case, but he's wearing arm wrappings. So that is a type of level 1 armor that adds 1 resilience to him. So he has a resilience of 3. And so you subtract that 3 from the total 9 that we got there a minute ago. Remember, that was from the attacker's power plus the weapon damage plus this d6. So subtract the resilience of 3, so it's going to be 6 damage total to the defender's left arm. So on the character sheet, you can see you have a spot for head, chest, right arm, right leg, left leg. And I've written in the total health points that each of these starts with. This is obviously in the book. This is standard for every character. 10 for the head, 15 for the chest, and 12 for all the others. Now, the right arm is what was just attacked, and the defender lost 6 health points for that. So you would actually reduce their right arm down to 6 at this point. And I have not written in the armor that they were wearing. Obviously, you would write all that stuff in as well. But in this case, the right arm is now down to 6 health points. Well, what happens when you get down to 0 with a particular section of your body? If any section of that gladiator's body is reduced to 0, then that means he is seriously wounded, and that gladiator is immediately removed from the game. It can no longer be used during this particular combat. Also, one more thing, as an attacker, you are able, just in the same way with movement, that you can use your additional action to move 1 additional space. As an attacker, you can use a second action to give yourself +1 power for that turn, which is obviously going to make it easier to deal a little bit extra damage. So both movement and attacking have the ability to use a second action to boost it just a bit. It's a very inefficient movement or attack, I should say a very inefficient way to use that additional action, but it may be what you need to do in specific situations. Now, going back real quick to the stats for your health on these. Each of these at the beginning of a battle will start at full health regardless of what happened in the previous battle. However, during a battle, there's no way to heal these. You're obviously not going to be getting medical treatment in the middle of a gladiatorial battle. It's also possible through leveling up that you'll be able to increase these stats as you go along. So now let's talk about the gladiatorial campaign for a minute. When you start a campaign, players are going to start every campaign with a 500 gold coin skirmish game. So you're going to build your gladiator forces with that 500 gold coins and fight against whoever else is going to be involved in the campaign in this way. In a campaign, you are not allowed to purchase levels the way you are in a skirmish mode. So that 50 gold coin purchase that you can make at the beginning of a skirmish, you can't do that in a campaign. You have to start level 1, 0 experience. Now, after this initial 500 gold coin skirmish, future combats will require players to agree on the level of that particular match. And what that means is, for instance, if you have a level 4 match, then that means you could bring in 4 level 1 gladiators, or 2 level 2 gladiators, or a level 3 gladiator and a level 1 gladiator, and that sort of thing. You see where that's going. If players can't decide, well, I guess I should say that if there's some discrepancy as far as what you're going to do, keep in mind that the highest the level can be is whatever the weakest player can field, if that makes sense. So if the best a particular player can field is 5 levels worth of gladiators, then that's the max that you're going to be able to do. You can't go, create a level 8 match when one player is only able to field 5 levels of gladiators. Now, during campaign, for every 5 wins that a player gets, they gain a passive ability, and this ability is really more of a player ability than it is for the gladiators themselves. One of those is Haggler, and what this is going to do is make every gladiator that you purchase after you gain this ability cost 2d6 less than the 90 gold coins they normally cost. So basically, you're going to purchase a gladiator, you roll 2d6, subtract whatever that value is from the 90, and that's how much that gladiator is going to cost. Another of the passive abilities is Trainer, and when you're paying to train after a battle, the gladiator gains an additional 5 experience points. Now, we haven't talked about training after a battle yet. We'll get to that, but just know that if you have that ability, the gladiator will get 5 additional experience points on top of what they normally get for training. Then there is Merchant, where weapons and armor cost 5 gold coins less than normal, down to a minimum of 5 gold coins. So when you're purchasing new armor and weapons for your gladiators, that's going to help you out a bit. And the other passive ability that currently is in the game is Appraiser, where you may add +1 to all die rolls when you're determining the class of your gladiator. So when you saw me roll that 1 earlier and got a peasant, he actually would have been the next level up from there. Now, the game allows for players to decide how long a campaign is going to last. You can, do it however you want. Wait until nobody's having fun anymore, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. You can choose a certain number of wins, which probably is the best way to go about it, or a certain number of matches total. Because in the end, it's not going to be who has the most wins that determines the winner of the campaign as a whole. It's going to be who has the most honor. And how do you decide who has the most honor? You'll take your wins, add in your total party charisma, and then add to that your total party levels, and then subtract away all your losses, and that will be the honor that you have gained during this campaign. And whoever has the most honor will be the person who's won the campaign. So you can see how, while losing is going to affect that, it's not necessarily the key to winning the campaign. So a battle will end in one of 2 ways. Either gladiators or a player's entire team is seriously wounded. All 4 gladiators, or I say 4, that's because I've got 4 right here, but your entire team is seriously wounded, or 50% are wounded or more, at least 50% are wounded, and you choose to surrender. Now, why would you choose to surrender mid-battle if you've still got fighting gladiators? Well, because at the end of battle, whoever is seriously wounded, you're going to roll a die. And when you roll that die, you're then going to combine that score with your charisma. So let's say I roll a 5. All right, so I'm doing pretty good. If my charisma is a 1, that means I rolled a 6. And what that means is the crowd has decided to spare this gladiator, because if you roll a combined score of 4 or higher, then the crowd spares your gladiator. If, however, let's say this guy's charisma is a 2 and I roll a 1, well, now what that means is the crowd has decided they'd rather see this guy executed, and the crowd boos and he gets executed and he is done. He's dead. All of his, obviously you lose this gladiator. All of his armor and weapons get returned to you, but that particular gladiator is gone. So if this would end up being one of your higher level gladiators that had some nicer equipment that he was using, you're out of luck because he's dead. So for that reason, it may be beneficial to surrender if you see the way the battle's going prior to all of your guys getting seriously wounded, because everyone that's seriously wounded, you have to roll a die. Now, that's not just for the loser. The winner's going to have to roll a die for seriously wounded gladiators as well, but it still is something that you got to keep in mind when you're deciding if you're going to continue fighting as more and more of your gladiators get wounded. Now, regardless of how the battle ended, every gladiator that is seriously wounded and spared by the crowd receives -1 charisma, which means the next time that they're seriously wounded, it's going to be less likely that the crowd will spare them. Also, if your team surrenders, so you have some seriously wounded gladiators and you say, okay, we're going to stop because 50% of my guys are hurt and I want to stop now. Your entire team is going to get that -1 charisma, even though some of them were not seriously wounded, because the crowd does not look favorably upon a team that surrenders mid-combat. Now let's say you had 2 gladiators executed. You are able to, instead of purchasing a new gladiator for 90 gold coins, you can instead take a free peasant for each executed gladiator. If instead you decide to replace them by purchasing gladiators, you will have to roll the die to determine the class of the gladiator, and if you roll a 1, then you're still going to get a peasant, which means you spent 90 gold coins on a peasant that you could have gotten for free. But of course, you have a 5 out of 6 chance of getting something better than a peasant if you decide to purchase a gladiator. Now, a gladiator cannot use armor or weapons above the level that he currently is. So level 1 gladiator only has access to level 1 weaponry. Level 2 would have access to level 2 and 1, and it goes like that. So it's important to get your gladiator level up. Now, how do you level up a gladiator? Well, you have to earn experience, and the way you know where the cap is to get to the next level, if you're level 1, you're trying to get level 2, basically you take 20 times the level you're trying to get to. So to get to level 2, you need 40. To get to level 3, you would then need an additional 60 experience points on top of what you've already earned, and so on and so forth. Now, there are a number of ways for gladiators to earn experience. You get 15 experience points for surviving a battle with absolutely no injury. You get 10 experience points for surviving a battle with injury, but without being seriously wounded. And you get 5 experience points if you survive a battle seriously wounded, but you were spared by the crowd. You also get 5 experience points every time you seriously wound an enemy. You get 10 experience points for being the winning player that you can then give to whichever gladiator you want to on your team. And you get 15 experience points to a single gladiator if you choose to train him after a battle. And that's going to cost you 20 gold coins if you choose to get that experience points that route. And remember, there was that one passive ability that you could obtain where you get additional experience points for that 20 gold coins. So that's a way to make that even more efficient. It could be a quick way of leveling up your gladiator. Now, when a gladiator levels up, you're going to automatically receive +1 charisma every time. So just for leveling up, you get additional charisma. However, you also can choose to either receive +2 health to every single stat as far as your the sections of your body. So your head, chest, arms, legs, they all would get +2 health, or you can learn a combat skill. And I'm not going to go through all the combat skills, but those are just like weaponry and armor in the sense that there are certain skills available at certain levels. And the first one's obviously going to be available at level 2. There's no combat skills on level 1. But that's something to consider whether you want to increase the health of your different sections of your body, which obviously is going to make them more durable, or if these combat skills are going to be more beneficial to you than getting the extra health. And just to give you an idea of what some of these combat skills will do for you, one of the level 2 combat skills is Jumper, which allows a gladiator to move over other warriors or obstacles. You can't end your movement in a space that has another warrior or obstacle in it, but you can jump over them. Level 3 is Dodge, where the gladiator may choose one extra section to defend against during ranged attacks. And then like a level 4 would be Forceful Blows. The gladiator has +1 power. So these are some different skills that you're able to obtain. Now obviously gold is going to be very important in this game because that's how you're going to continue to upgrade your weapons, armor, and purchase new gladiators after you've lost some. Gold is awarded to players whether or not they win the match, and you get a number of ways. You get 10 gold coins just for the game's level value. So you're playing a level 5 match, you're getting 50 gold coins just for that. Then you get 5 gold coins for every opponent that you seriously wounded. You're going to get 50 gold coins for winning the match. 2 gold coins for every point of damage that you sustained. So the crowd's excited, your guys are spilling their blood. You're going to get compensated from that a little bit. So 2 gold coins for every point of damage you sustained. And then 20 gold coins for each of your gladiators executed by the crowd, so you do get some sort of recompense for losing gladiators in that way. Now, weapons and armor do have special traits, and I'm not going to go through all of these either, but I do want to give you an idea of the kind of things that you're going to run into. If a weapon is cumbersome, it's going to take both hands to wield this, which means you can't have any other item in your offhand. If a weapon is a polearm, on the other hand, it's going to take more strength to wield effectively, but it's not as bad as a cumbersome weapon, so you are able to have a shield in your offhand, but not a second weapon. If you have a piece of equipment that has the parry ability, it might say parry 1. In that case, you get to choose one additional section of your body to defend against incoming attacks from a melee weapon. On the other hand, if it has deflect, let's say deflect 1, then you would choose one additional section of your body to defend against an incoming ranged attack. And then there's stuff like stun, where you are going to cause your opponent to lose a certain number of movement points, or ensnare, where an opponent must use a certain number of actions to free himself before he can continue doing anything. And then there's different things to increase your resilience. You might have a heavy item that's going to give you some sort of benefit, but it's also going to cost you a movement point. So you can see that there's and here's my personal favorite, counterattack. So this one, if the gladiator takes no damage after being attacked, then you immediately get to attack back against the other player, and regardless of what the roll is, as long as you score a hit, you're going to then deal the damage listed. So if it says counterattack 2, when you do that counterattack, it automatically deals 2 damage as long as you score a hit, regardless of what the die rolls are. Now, I've already told you about the scenarios in the back of the book. 12 different scenarios back there for you to play with. Obviously, this is going to be something where you'll be able to generate your own scenarios if you'd like as well. However, there's one additional scenario that I hadn't talked about yet, where let's say you've got a gladiator whose charisma has fallen so far that it is just not feasible to use him anymore. And not only that, but maybe he's dragging you down because obviously your charisma is a part of your honor for in-game scoring at the end of a campaign. So what you may want to do is put this gladiator up against a legend. And basically what is going to be single combat, one-on-one combat, and you're going to roll a die to determine if you fight against Hercules, the Fates, or the Minotaur. Now, whoever you fight against, that guy will be controlled by an opposing player. And the stats of this legend are so significant that it's highly unlikely your gladiator is going to survive. Now, if that gladiator does lose, which is to be expected against these guys, you're going to be compensated 70 gold coins, but you will lose any equipment that gladiator was using. On the other hand, if somehow the gladiator miraculously survives this combat, this single combat with this legend, he will gain 2 charisma for defeating him and 15 experience points, and the player is given 50 gold coins. During this combat with the legend, as soon as the gladiator is seriously wounded, he's executed. The crowd can't spare you. This is going to be a situation where the moment you're wounded seriously, you're dead. Also keep in mind that win or lose, this battle counts towards your total win-loss for the purpose of end campaign scoring. So there you have it. That's Legends of the Colosseum. If this is a game that you find interesting, please give it a look on Kickstarter when that goes up. Again, the description below will have the link for that as soon as it's available. From what I've seen so far, I am very intrigued. If this game funds to the level where it will have plastic miniatures or even pewter miniatures, that'll be really cool. But even still, with the standees, the mechanisms of the game, I think, could be very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what other things get added to it, the tweaks and that sort of thing as this goes along. So be sure to check it out on Kickstarter when that comes around. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you like my channel, please subscribe. You can find me on Twitter @BoardOffline. Go give me a heart over on Board Game Links. I'm working my way up that list. And yeah, find me on BGG. We have a guild. The link is in the description below. Until next time, if you're bored online, board offline.